You're listening to The Drew Yari Show.
That's the wine and diner with kings and queens.
You're looking at the man. You're listening to The Drew Yari Show.
I just thought, I just really wasn't going to do a live show. I just decided to pre-record. Kind of got the inspiration from Julian last night. I was on Wrestling Court with Julian, and literally right before we started, he's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to do it live. I'm just going to pre-record, whatever." So, look out for that episode to happen. It was me and well, it was Julian's show. Rob wasn't there. It was Chris Bettis. Hold on, let me make sure I'm getting his name right. Chris Bettis, there you go. Julian he literally sent me an invite at, I think, like 8 in the morning yesterday, and I woke up at 12. It was my days off are always Wednesday and Thursday. And I just woke up, and I got an invite saying, "Hey, you available, tonight?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So, had plenty of water. So, this cold could not have come at a worse time. When everyone's already freaking out, like you can just like sneeze and somebody will just you'll make someone feel uncomfortable. At my job, I work in an office. I work at the sheriff's office for my county, and I work in records, dealing with records, IDs, and blah blah blah. And I was sitting in a cubicle that day, and we were just answering phones, and I'm not coughing up a storm, because I'm doing the smart thing. I either cover my mouth, I cover in my, or not cover, I cough in my arm, or I won't even open my mouth. I'll just go, and it's not even really an intense cough, but this lady sitting in the cubicle next to me decides to go behind my back and go to my supervisor and complain that, I'm coughing and, she doesn't want to get sick and blah, blah, blah. And my supervisor clearly looks like she is annoyed. Not by me, but by her, because, this lady that I'm speaking about, she will pretty much every day have a complaint about something. Like, she'll just go in somebody's office and complain about something. And, she just said, "I'm just going to take your phone, just go clean folders, but sit somewhere else because so she doesn't have to come in here again. I don't want to deal with her." I was like, "What? Cool, fine." So, yeah, it's, again, this cold could not have come at a worse time. And literally for the month of January, I was dealing with a cold. I was sick all month. It went away, and then it decides to come back during this whole coronavirus fucking pandemic. Who, according to Julian, according to, John Draper, shout out to those guys, New York has become a war zone. It has become a fucking war zone. It is fucking nuts. And I feel terrible for anyone having to live there during this shit. I feel terrible for anyone having to live anywhere during this shit. I mean, for all accounts and purposes, Texas, I don't think is that bad. I'm not trying to rub it in anyone's face, but so far I don't think we're that bad. But I guess one of those things, give it time because someone's gonna find a way to fuck it up. What the hell is this symbol? Okay, whatever. I just saw some weird symbol I hadn't seen before. I guess I paid more attention to the soundbar when I'm talking. But this whole quarantine thing, it's it's really nothing new. I mean, because we weren't really doing anything before this quarantine. Where they're like, make sure you're staying home, make sure you're avoiding people, make sure you're not in large crowds. So I'm just like, yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years. It's nothing new. I'm the fucking world champ of staying away from large crowds and avoiding people and staying at home. And Angie Carlick from False. I'm just like dropping all these kinds of names. I don't give a fuck. Angie Carlick from False Tornado, shout out to him. He said, I'm paraphrasing, for the first time, we can save the world by sitting at home and watching TV. I'm just like, fuck yeah. That's all we've been doing. You're just sitting home and watching movies and, television. Mainly movies. We have all the apps, and by we, I mean I'm paying for all of them. Like Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, the network, which I mainly watch, YouTube TV. We have a Fire Stick, which I bought. Yeah, Amazon Prime, I'm paying for it. On Prime, we installed this app, or I installed this app that you can watch literally any movie, any television show for free. It comes with links, so, you gotta make sure you pick the right link. It works better for movies. I tried television shows. Television shows, work okay on it, but, we mainly just watch movies on it. And with this, with movie theaters closing, a lot of studios have been releasing movies, through digital. They released Sonic the Hedgehog, which is weird because we watched it last week, and we picked a really good link, and it had like these Chinese subtitles. And literally the very next day it came out, Universal's gonna, I think it was Universal. Oh, Paramount, actually. Paramount, Paramount's gonna be releasing Sonic, digitally. It's like, okay. That was quick. Same thing with like Birds of Prey and, Invisible Man and shit like that. There's a rumor that Disney might be releasing Black Widow on Disney Plus, which I hope not. I really hope not. They were thinking about releasing Wonder Woman 2 digitally, but then Warner Bros. Was like, actually, we're just going to push it back. We're just going to push it till, like, I think August. I think that's what they should do with Black Widow. You should just be releasing, like, kind of the smaller movies. Not to say Sonic was a small movie, but, Marvel is a big juggernaut. DC is a big juggernaut, depending on how you look at it. Black Widow is a movie we've been all... I mean, if you're a Marvel fan, we've been waiting for it. If you're a Black Widow fan, we've been waiting for it. This is going to be our first big movie. It should not be on a small screen. It should be in the theaters. So, hopefully by, fall, this is all done. Which, I mean, I think it will, because we're hearing strides in China. China's getting better. So, I mean, I try to be a little bit optimistic, shocking. As shocking as it sounds, people who know me, I try to be optimistic. That might be considered reckless, quote unquote, but that's just how I view it. Just push Black Widow to like fall. Push it to, and there's also the Eternals. The Eternals isn't going to come out until November. Why not just have both movies come out around the same time? Matter of fact, have Black Widow come out on Christmas time. Fuck it. Have it be a big Christmas movie. Bring all the family. Bring all the family to watch a movie about Russians, about Russian spies. I mean, fuck it. Why not? Why haven't come out in like around Halloween time? Can you imagine everybody showing up to the theater dressed as Black Widow? Like, that would be so cool. Or, why did my voice just crack? Have it come out around 4th of July. Like, those are some good choices. Like, and this would be cutting close into Wonder Woman. It's like, you get two big movies. You get Black Widow in July, and the very next month you get Wonder Woman. Two big, female superhero movies. So, but don't release it on Disney Plus. I mean, if it gets released, I'm obviously going to watch it. But I really think you should just not. If you're Disney, They released Onward on Disney Plus, I believe, and then they released Frozen 2. I'm not saying those are small movies. Anything Disney related is not going to be a small movie. But a Marvel movie, it should not be released straight through Disney Plus. It should be in the theaters. People should be enjoying it in the theaters. See, Rey Mysterio and Dana Brooke have to quarantine at home. There's no ruling on if they have coronavirus or not. They just have the flu. Dana Brooke was supposed to be in a WrestleMania match. She was supposed to be in that Gauntlet women's match. So, fun. WrestleMania, they announced, I think it was last week, that it will be taped for 2 nights. Wait, yeah, we actually did talk about it on the show last week. It's gonna be taped for 2 nights. There's already, I think, 10 matches announced. Let me look it up real quick. Good old Wikipedia. Never let me down. Alright, let's see. It'll be April 4th and 5th. What matches are... 13 matches. Wow. Alright, so, yeah, let's kind of go over the match card again. So it's for 2 nights. You got Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. And then you got Brock and Drew. You got Goldberg and Roman. Becky versus Shayna. John Cena versus The Fiend. And blah, blah, blah. So, alright, how many Raw matches? Alright, I'm going to count how many Raw matches. You got Brock versus Drew. That's a Raw match. Becky versus Shayna. Another Raw match. Taker versus AJ. Kevin Owens versus Seth. Street Profits versus Andrade and Angel Garza. Aleister Black versus Bobby Lashley, which, why? Then you got Edge versus Orton. So that's 7. That's 7 Raw matches. And, Rhea versus Charlotte's an NXT match. So you have 5 SmackDown matches. So, what do you do with these? I mean, okay. I don't know what you do with this. I mean, like, do you tape Raw on one night and then do you just tape SmackDown the next night? I mean, that seems logical, but SmackDown only has 5 matches. I mean, do you just add Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair for that night, and do you just leave the 7 Raw matches on Saturday? Or here's a better idea. How's about postponing the fucking show? Postpone until July. I mean, the rumor is that they were negotiating, with Madison Square Garden to move it, to 4th of July weekend. Which that would have been ideal. But then again, it's all about prolonging these feuds. Because Edge versus Orton is the only match that's pushed well. Other than that, Drew versus Brock, I don't think people, as much as I like Drew McIntyre, I don't know if people would invest in waiting, around March 26th, waiting 4 months to build this feud. I mean, they could do it, but I don't think people would want to see it. And then you got John Cena versus The Fiend, which I don't know if John Cena has to film a movie in the summer. Maybe he does. Nobody gives 2 fucks about Goldberg versus Roman Reigns. I mean, let's just be real. Not one person wants to see this fucking match. This match did not need to happen. Nobody cares about AJ and Taker. I mean, they're having a boneyard match, which it's obviously like, I guess, a take on a cemetery match, which they can't say cemetery, but they could say boneyard. I mean, I think both sound just the same, but whatever. You got the Street Profits having their first WrestleMania, which, they can't enjoy it in front of other people. Elias versus King Corbin. Who the fuck wants to watch this? a lot of these matches just scream of, first hour of Raw. Elias versus King Corbin, Aleister Black versus Bobby Lashley, which poor Aleister Black, by the way. This guy looked like he was going to have a big WrestleMania moment. Like, it was going to be like, oh, so you're going to team with Taker? Is he going to fight AJ at Mania? Is he going to fight Taker at Mania? This guy was being built up as being a main eventer, and he still is. And then you're going to saddle him with Bobby Lashley. Like, why? Somebody please answer that question for me. Why? Let's see. You got Bayley versus Lacey Evans versus Naomi versus Sasha Banks versus Tamina. Which this match screams of, it's going to come down to Sasha and Bayley. They're teasing, the big feud. I mean, are they going to turn Sasha heel? Which I kind of hope not, because Sasha... face, I'm sorry. Are they going to turn Sasha face? I kind of hope not, because Sasha's better as a heel. And Bayley kind of sucks as a heel. Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair. Again, another match where it would have been better in front of a bigger crowd. Because this is Rhea Ripley's first WrestleMania. So this would have been her Mania moment. And there's not going to be anyone there to fucking enjoy it. Same thing with Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre had his big moment at the Royal Rumble, eliminating Brock and then winning it. So what's going to happen if Drew wins and he's trying to celebrate and yet there's nobody fucking there? Again, this Rumble... This card did not need to happen. Like, there wouldn't have been any shame in just postponing Mania and moving it to the summer, or replacing SummerSlam with it. I mean, those equally would have been better, good choices. But again, Vince McMahon has it in his mind, that WWE is the savior of all humanity, and that, we put on good entertainment to put smiles on faces. This is going to be a disaster. This Mania is going to be a disaster. It is going to Vince is going to lose a lot of money. He's already lost money with the XFL being postponed. And now, did it just come out yesterday that he had to sell stocks? I think he had to sell, what is it, like $30 or $40 million in stock shares? Like, it's bad. It's bad. I mean, this kind of segues into Vince needs to not be in charge anymore. Triple H needs to take the reins. But, I can talk about that till I'm blue in the face, and it probably won't happen anytime soon. It's only going to happen if Vince dies. Because there's no way in hell that Vince is going to give up this company to anyone, not even his family. And I've also kind of asked the question of, like, WWE is a publicly traded company. And I don't know the first thing about business, but aren't there a board of directors? Like, aren't there people, invested into this company that can make a decision to get rid of somebody? And can't they get rid of Vince? Like, I don't know how Vince has stayed this long. And it's weird because to the fans, the company sucks. But to the company, we're making more money than we've ever had before. And it's like, yeah, you guys are making money in spite of yourselves. It's insane. And I would have to imagine that Fox, has buyer's remorse because SmackDown sucks. They haven't been giving them good ratings since, like, the first show that was on Fox. There's a part of them that has to go, we need to get out of this contract somehow. Oh, man. Wrestling is just in a very tough time right now. And it needs fans. There's no way you can put on a wrestling show without fans. I mean, AEW has been... They managed to make it work for the first week. The second week, not so much. This recent episode of AEW, watched it. It was the first time I sat down and watched AEW live, like an entire episode live. Because I have a DVR on YouTube TV, and I'll just watch it like literally the hour after it comes out. Sorry, I'm just clearing my throat. But I actually watched it live. And the show wasn't bad, but they clearly need fans. They need fans in the stands to enjoy the show. They kept going through this weird thing where they had wrestlers last night do commentary. Cody Rhodes is not very good on commentary. Kenny Omega was not very good on commentary. And it was kind of interesting that I had Jim Ross there. Jim Ross kind of stay in the back, be a producer or something, or be head of talent. He needs to not be on commentary anymore. It's not working for him. Keep Taz there. I know a lot of people don't like Taz, and I can understand why. I like Taz on commentary. I don't know why. I just do. I think he's witty. I think he's entertaining. I think he gets it. So keep Taz on commentary. Keep Taz. Get rid of Excalibur. I don't really care for him. Tony Schiavone. Keep Tony Schiavone as like an interviewer. So that just leaves somebody else to be a color commentary guy on commentary. With Taz, I don't know who else you could put with Taz. I don't know. It's interesting. I would say Joey Styles, but I don't know if Joey Styles really wants a job. And then again, that just echoes my statement of, get rid of Jim Ross, he's old. Get rid of Tony Schiavone, he's old. But bring in Joey Styles. And Joey Styles, I think I would imagine, is a lot younger than Jim Ross. But it'd be an interesting tandem to see Taz and Joey Styles. Fuck it. My dog just barked at something. Whatever. But as for the rest of the show, you had a match like Kenny Omega versus Sammy Guevara. It was for the AAA Mega Championship. And I don't like either of those guys. I'm not a fan of them. I did get a pop. I did, laugh whenever Sammy Guevara puts up these like caricatures of it was Jericho and Brandy in the stands, and Brandy's like the ring announcer, and he's his whole shtick is that he flirts with Brandy, and during the match he goes up to Brandy's caricature and just starts making out with it, and Brandy just has this look on his face like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I thought that was funny. But that's a match that needed fans because, again, I'm not a fan of them, but other people are. And I would imagine that whole place would have went fucking apeshit crazy for that match. I mean, the match was okay. It wasn't terrible. I honestly thought Guevara was going to win, but, they want to keep it on Omega. If Omega's going to drop it, it's going to be over there. So, but I did watch their match, Omega versus Phoenix for that title. I prefer Phoenix over Omega. That's just a preference. Let's see. I'm for the rest of the night. I think some other matches that happened. You had Jake Hager versus somebody. I'm forgetting. It ended up being like a squash match, and he just tap out. Jake Hager's music sucks. It doesn't match him. I mean, I guess he likes rap music, which that's fine, but it doesn't fit him when he comes out. If you're gonna pick rap music, well, why don't you just pick like better rap music? There's better rap and hip hop out there, but yeah, it doesn't fit him. John Moxley comes out, he makes his return, and beats up Jake Hager, then calls him on a promo, kind of putting the shout there, that you're going to be my next challenger for the AEW World Championship. I think the match is next week, so that'd be interesting. You had Cody versus Jimmy Havoc. Yawn. Cody wins. You had Jake Roberts cut a promo on the screen, just basically challenging Cody, saying, we want a shot at you, calling him Caesar. it's weird because I said, the promo was weird, but I found myself interested. Like, I was, like, leaning forward, listening, like, I don't know what he's talking about, but it's so captivating. And that's the thing about Jake. He's the guy gets it on commentary. It's like, I mean, again, there's similarities between him and Bray Wyatt, but Lance Archer, I haven't watched his work in NJPW, so I can't judge him. I've watched his work in TNA when he was Lance Hoyt. He was, him and, Jimmy... Was it Jimmy Rage? That was his name? They were, like, groupies for Christy Hemme. Because she was trying to push her music career, which... I don't know how that worked out. Oh, yeah, Brody Lee. So Brody Lee has, like... more like Brody McManley. So Brody Lee does a vignette as the leader of the Dark Order, or the Dork Order, as we like to call him. And he's eating at a steakhouse, which, I'm not gonna lie, that steak looked really fucking good. I haven't had a steak in a while. He's eating a nice steak, and, he has his two guys, with him, just saying, you guys need to, get your shit in order, A, B, C, and D. One of them starts to eat, and he looks at him and says, "What the hell are you doing? You're not supposed to eat when I'm eating. Does it look like I'm done eating? Get out of here!" And then the other guy sneezes, and he tells him, "Get the hell out of here," which, that was an obvious shot at Vince McMahon. That whole segment was just to make Brody Lee look like Vince McMahon. Which, that was a stupid segment. Because the way they were building up Brody Lee was that he was going to be the leader of this group. He was going to be this tough leader of this, this cult-like group. And then first vignette in, I'm interested in what Jim Cornette is going to think about this. I'm very interested because Jim has, his past dealings with Vince. He's been around Vince, an awful lot. I'm interested to hear what he says. The first promo in this, they pretty much make Brody Lee into Vince McMahon. Brody McMahon. And supposedly the WWE doesn't like it. They thought they hated it. They're pissed off. So, there's that. And, oh yeah, the main event was Omega and, as far as like the match, like the main event match of the night, it was Omega versus Sammy Guevara. If I'm missing other matches, I'm sorry. The show closes with Jericho coming out, calling out, broken Matt Hardy. And out comes Vanguard 1. And I thought it was funny. Jericho was, shit-talking a Vanguard. Or not a Vanguard, but a drone. Calling the drone a piece of shit. And I just thought it was something. Only Jericho can get that over. Only Jericho can do that, and it looks right. Because it's just Jericho. He gets it. And then out comes Matt Hardy with a new entrance music, which is just, piano music or whatever. I don't know if this show was taped. I don't know if the rest of the show is live and this segment was taped. You had Matt Hardy come out through the empty arena. And he's at the top of the arena, and then he glitches, and then he's in another part of the arena. And then he glitches, and he's in another part of the arena. And then he glitches, and he's in the front row. And then he glitches, and he's in the ring. So, and he comes in, "I am magic!" That was a bad impression, by the way. I made my bones about it on Twitter. I thought the segment was kind of stupid. I mean, Jericho was able to get it over and make it seem interesting. Because, there were parts where, Matt Hardy would be talking to the crowd. And Jericho would be like, "There's nobody here." But I'm probably going to get in trouble with a lot of people. The Matt Hardy gimmick is not interesting. The broken gimmick was interesting 4 years ago. 2020, it is not very interesting. It's weird to say dated because it was 4 years ago. It's not like it was like 20 years ago, but it doesn't work now. It's kind of stupid. I mean, it's the first week, but I was not impressed by it. This is a gimmick that I think needs an audience. But then again, wrestling needs an audience. You know, watching these empty arena shows, it's really disturbing. It's disturbing and depressing. Not TNA. AEW makes it work because they don't acknowledge the audience. They don't put a big ass... I'm trying to get comfortable. That's why I'm, grunting. Oh, man. AEW makes it work because they don't shine a light on the audience. They don't really show the chairs that much, except in that one segment. They focus on the ring. They try to make it into a wrestling show, and kudos to them. And they pretty much turn off the lights in the audience. They took out all the chairs in the front row. WWE, for whatever reason, focuses on the empty chairs, and they try to make a joke out of it, and that just doesn't work. I mean, you want to do it at the Performance Center? Fine. Turn off the fucking lights. Have the camera focus primarily just on the ring, on the two competitors. Like, don't focus on the crowd, on the chairs at all. Like, matter of fact, take out the chairs. Put a big tarp over where the audience chairs are, or just turn off the lights. Don't even focus on them. And just focus on the fucking ring and focus on the performers. I heard NXT was good. I didn't get a chance to watch it. I watched the end, which we'll talk about in a bit. But, yeah, the segment with Matt and Jericho, especially Matt, it didn't work. I don't think this gimmick for Matt is going to work in 2020. I just don't. I don't think it's going to work. It was fine 4 years ago in a smaller company. Impact. Impact is a lot smaller than AEW. AEW has a billionaire family behind it. Impact, they don't really have. They had a billionaire, or a millionaire. I don't know how much money Dixie Carter made, but they couldn't do shit with it. So there's AEW for you. I don't think the ratings came out. Usually the ratings come out before I do the show, but if I had to imagine, I would say AEW won. But for NXT, again, didn't get a chance to watch it. NXT hasn't really been on my radar as of late. They haven't really impressed me. Again, I heard the last night's show was actually very good. Again, watch the ending with Gargano and Ciampa coming to the ring. Triple H, letting him know, hey, you're not fighting. If it was up to Regal, you guys would be fired. I'm not going to fire you, but you're not fighting tonight. You guys are just going to talk. You guys are going to talk about your match, blah, blah, blah. And then after the segment, you have this vignette play about, showing like the apocalypse, the end of days. Yeah, and you see fucking Killer Cross's face. They just literally show his face, and you see a clock, going tick tock, which if anyone doesn't know, Killer Cross, that's kind of his, I don't know if his catchphrase, or maybe it's just like I guess it's his catchphrase where he goes tick tock. So they're saving his debut for whenever they do start having audiences, which last I heard it was going to be until May. Which, if you're going to debut Killer Cross, he needs to be in front of people. He needs that audience reaction. Same thing AEW. If you're going to debut a Matt Hardy debuting in AEW would have been huge. In AEW in front of people would have been huge. Like, can you imagine how ape shit that crowd would have been if they saw Vanguard 1? As soon as they heard the little, flying propellers on them, they would have went ape shit. So, they NXT, they need to wait. Like, the first show they have where they can have people in it, you debut Killer Cross. Like, do that, please. And then, TakeOver got canceled. and it was announced that it was going to be on April 1st, which is next Wednesday. So, pretty much all the TakeOver matches are going to be next Wednesday. So, I mean, that's good, because, you know, it sucks that they had to cancel TakeOver. I mean, in all actuality, if you want to look at it, they should have just postponed Mania and had TakeOver in its place. That would have been a more logical idea. Alright, so we talked about AEW, talked about Killer Cross, talked about NXT for a bit. I mean, the only thing left to do is talk about the Chris Benoit documentary. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen it. Pretty much every podcast, anyone who's anyone in the podcasting world, have been talking about it. What the fuck? That's my Discord. We talked about it. We talked about it on Wrestling Court. I didn't really get a chance to talk about it too much. Not to say I was being, you know, held down by Julian. Julian was holding me down. I don't know why I'm Triple H. But Wrestling Soup has been talking about it. You know, DTKC talked about it. Pretty much anyone who's anyone has been talking about it. So, last week, Vice already put out part 1 on YouTube. And you know, obviously I watched, you know, part 1. And then a good friend of ours, I'm not going to mention his name, put out a torrent of part 2. And I ended up watching part 2. And I can tell you, I don't know who it was. Apparently somebody might have snitched to... Either somebody snitched or somebody saw it. And they, you know, or I don't know, Vice found out about it, and they messaged, you know, said friend. And they said it very nicely, and they said, yeah, we're going to need you to take that down because we wanted that to be a big thing. So, and it got taken down. I was able to watch it, by the way. It was like on some Russian website. But I ended up watching it twice because I watched it again yesterday just to kind of be ready for Julian's show and kind of remind myself of certain things that happened on the show. So part 1 discusses, you know, really Benoit's history, you know, starting out in the business. If anyone's ever read Ring of Hell, if anyone ever like watched Benoit's documentary, you know, WWE, you know, 2004, before the tragedies, you know, he loved wrestling growing up. He was a big fan of Dynamite Kid, who was, you know, Chris Benoit before Chris Benoit, you know, kind of, you know, inside the ring and outside the ring, unfortunately. And, you know, he became a wrestler when he was 18. He already started training when he was like already in high school. And if somebody can correct me, go right ahead. He trained under, you know, the Hart Dungeon. With the Hart family, like Bret Hart, Stu Hart, you know, Owen Hart, blah blah blah. Which, that's one thing I found kind of strange, is that Bret Hart wasn't in this documentary. There's a few people missing, and I can understand why they were missing, because it all comes down to they just didn't want to talk about it. They still feel weird talking about it. And, you know, Bret was one of them, and I'll get into the other people after the show, but Bret wasn't in the documentary, which I found kind of odd. And they just talk about Benoit's history. They don't really talk about his first marriage. David's in it. David Benoit. He's his son from his first marriage. Oh my god, I hate these fucking dogs that literally bark at anything that passes by. And then, you know, they get to friends like Jericho, who talks about his relationship with Benoit. Jericho was the narrator for this, and Jericho did a great job. Fuck these dogs. And then they get to his friendship with Eddie Guerrero. They get to Vicky Guerrero, they get to Chava Guerrero. There's an interesting part in it where Vicky revealed Eddie and Chris didn't like each other at first. Or Eddie didn't like Chris at first, he thought he was an asshole. He's like, man, I gotta work with this asshole for the next, 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually they become, really good friends. which becomes the focal point of part 1. They get to Nancy, which I didn't really know too much about Nancy's career. I knew enough. I knew that she was in the business. I knew that she was a valet. She looked like she'd been around everywhere. I mean, which surprisingly, she didn't work for WWE. I know she worked in like NWA, like Florida, WCW, ECW, but she didn't work in WWE, which I thought was kind of odd. Talk about her career. She was literally 18, like 18, 19 years old, and she went to her first wrestling show, and she was already married, and she got picked out of the audience by Kevin Sullivan, to be a part of this group where she becomes this kind of gothic dream girl almost. Like they call her. I think she was called Nancy at first, and then they just call her woman. And again, she was married. She was 19, and she was picked out of the audience by Kevin Sullivan. Eventually, she got divorced from her husband, and then she got with Kevin. And the way they described their relationship was, it was interesting because it seemed like it was okay at first, and then it got very volatile. Because Nancy's sister Sandra, who she was on Jericho's podcast. Was it like 3 years ago, which was actually on like the 10-year anniversary of Benoit Brothers. She would talk about their relationship, and the way she described it was that they both loved each other. Kevin worshipped her and adored her, and same thing with Nancy. And this is where Chris Benoit comes in. They're in WCW. And Kevin Sullivan was the booker. And he booked himself into an angle with Chris Benoit, who Chris Benoit at the time was with the Four Horsemen. He decides to book, and the joke that Sandra makes is that Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce, which was funny at first, but it's not really so funny now. Obviously. And he decides to have an angle where Benoit and Nancy, are having an affair behind Kevin Sullivan's back because he thinks it'll work. But and after I bring a hell, he literally told Chris and Nancy, "I want you guys to hold hands in public. I want you guys to make out. I want you guys to share the same hotel room, make it look interesting." And in the end, what's the saying? Entertainment reflects reality, or something like that. In the end, Nancy was falling for Chris, and Chris was falling for Nancy. And I think at the time, Chris was married. He was either married or already, had his foot out the door or something like that. Which, it was insinuated that that's what kind of caused their marriage to become a lot more volatile. Like, they would fight a lot. And one of the interesting guests on the episode was that they brought in Dean Malenko's wife. Dean Malenko was on it, and Dean Malenko's wife was on it, which, I'm going to sound like a creep here. How the fuck did Dean Malenko learn that? Like, Jesus, she's gorgeous. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. She talks about, I believe she's a therapist. She has to be working as like a therapist of some sort, or she works, with women. Like, women in abused relationships or something like that. I think she works as a therapist. Because she says when she was a lot younger, she used to work in a therapist's office. And she had a good, close relationship with Nancy. She convinced Nancy to go see a therapist. And Chris came with her. And she was wearing these big sunglasses. When she took off the sunglasses, she had a black eye. Kevin beat her. So they showed the match. Blue Trez can't join. Sorry guys, Trez can't join. You just have to deal with me. It was Bash at the Beach 96? I believe. With Kevin Sullivan and Chris Benoit. And, Sandra had pointed out, you watch the match, and they're really laying in some hard hits. Like, they're literally hitting each other. Chris is beating the shit out of out of Kevin. I think he broke his jaw. And the story about what happened after the match was Nancy's sister was there, and she told her, wait in the car, me and Chris are going to be there, blah, blah, blah. And eventually, again, Chris and Nancy got together. They got married in 2000. And before that, Daniel was born. So, this whole doc was heartbreaking. What really broke my heart was David talking about the relationship that he had with Daniel and Nancy. Was, he said, Daniel was his little brother and he loved him. Like, he never... Here's the one... Oh my God, this broke my heart watching it. When he described his relationship with Nancy, he's like, she was my mom. She was my second mom. We didn't use the term step. I didn't call her my stepmom. I never called David my half brother. He was my brother. And I'm just like, oh. Like, with David, and I don't mean for this to sound condescending or mean. It looks like it was just hard for him to even talk. Like, just talk about this. You know what I mean? It was rough. You can tell he was really close to Daniel, and Daniel meant the world to him. And that he was really close to Nancy, and Nancy meant the world to him. And obviously he loved his dad. At the end of the day, he never spoke ill of his dad. This is where the other guest comes in. I said, there were a few people missing from this. You didn't see Brett in it, which I thought was kind of odd because they had history with Stampede Wrestling. You didn't, and Benoit. A lot of people don't know this. Benoit had a daughter, and it was actually with David in their first marriage. It was David, and he had a daughter named Megan, which, again, I can totally agree as to why she didn't want to do it. Maybe she just doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. Because you look at David. David has a much different perspective. David was very close with his dad. Maybe Megan was. We don't know that. But they were very close. And after this tragedy, David apparently, handled it differently than Megan. Maybe Megan, in her mind, is, I don't want anything to do with him. I don't want to talk about him. I don't want to acknowledge him. I don't want to deal with it. Or maybe, again, it's just hard for her to talk about it. You know what I mean? Same thing with Benoit's ex-wife before Nancy. Like, why wasn't she in it? And, again, it's one of those things where, like, why wasn't she in it? But I maybe understand why she wasn't in it. Same thing with Benoit's dad, who I don't mean this to sound mean. Is he even alive still? A lot of people, I guess, deal with grief in their own way. Maybe they just didn't want to talk about it. With Brett, maybe he wasn't available to do it because Brett has a schedule. He has a busy schedule. He does conventions. He does work for the WWE. So maybe he just wasn't able to do it. The other people, like Benoit's daughter and his dad, maybe they just didn't want to do it. Benoit's dad had to deal with it a lot during, the time that was happening. And maybe he's just done talking about it. Again, with his daughter, maybe she either just refuses to talk about it because she still holds resentment towards her dad. Or maybe she just doesn't feel comfortable talking about it. And the vibe I got, it looks like David and his sister were not really that close. The only really mention that you got from the documentary was when Sandra had mentioned, after the murders were happening, the media was, just giving us so much shit, and I just really wanted to be around my nephew and my niece. That's really the only mention that you get about, Benoit's daughter. So, then, I don't know. That's really my 2 cents about that situation. But David, talking about the relationship he had with Daniel, it was heartbreaking because you can tell he really loved him. And that he seemed like he was stoked to have a little brother. And, the relationship that they had together, Sandra described them as thick as thieves. Anytime they're around each other, they would wrestle each other. Benoit, Chris, just the whole thing about this was family, and that he loved being a dad. He loved his kids. His kids meant the world to him. There's some excerpts in it there's one notion where Jericho had talked about Chris was bummed out that he had to work certain holidays. That he'd work on Halloween. That he had to work on Father's Day. Jericho would tell him, "Why don't you just get those days off?" And I was able to get those days off. And Benoit was like, "Nah," but then I have to miss a show, and then I won't be able to make money. So it was kind of an odd situation where it's just like, I'm depressed, but I'm not going to ask for a day off because, the way Jericho described it, him and Eddie were, one and the same, where their family meant everything, but their art is what meant more. Their craft is what meant more. Because, and wrestling is a very cutthroat business. It's a little bit more toned down than it is now, because nowadays, Chris Benoit would have been able to get time off. Guerrero would have been able to get time off. And back then it was, if you're injured, then you're not going to be used on the show. Somebody else is going to take that spot. If you're not on the show, you're more than likely not going to get paid, and someone's going to take that spot. So that's the way Benoit saw it, is like, I got to keep making money to support my family. If it means missing birthdays, missing Halloween, missing Christmases, I got to be on the road. And we can jump into the ending of the episode. Well, not really the ending. Eddie passing away, which it still hurts losing Eddie. And just listening to the story over again, listening to Chavo describe it is just, oh man, there's a point. Or the way he describes it is, they were doing a super show in Minneapolis. I remember this because, the very next night on Raw, you saw SmackDown, you saw Raw guys. So they're going to do a super show in this, pretty much in the same arena. And what is it? Chavo and Eddie came in together, and Jericho, not Jericho, Benoit passed them. He said, "Hey, I'll see you guys tomorrow," because they're supposed to work out the very next day. And Chavo gets a knock on his door around 5:30 in the morning, I believe, and it's security. Hotel security saying, "Hey, something's wrong with your uncle. He didn't answer his wake-up call." And, they go to open the door, the latch is on, so that indicates that somebody is still there. So they get, shears, pliers, what do you want to call them, to chop off the lock, and they see, Guerrero, Eddie, in his bathroom, face down on the floor, with a toothbrush. And Chavo, just the way he's describing, details, just it's eerie. And Eddie literally passed away in his arms, because he says he turns over Eddie, and he just hears this gurgling noise, and he makes the sound, which again makes it even more eerie. And as he's talking about, he's breaking down, which obviously, but I don't think he's ever really had to talk about details, because I remember before he had talked about finding Eddie there, and that's really it. But he's never really had to go into in-depth detail about finding his body, about the noises he was making. And during it, Chavo just breaks down, and I'm just paraphrasing here. He says, "This is a part of my mind I don't like to access. I don't really like thinking about this." And while this is happening, Benoit calls Chavo and says, "Hey man, where are you guys at?" And Chavo tells Chris, "Where are you sitting down?" And he says, "Yeah." And he tells him, Eddie passed. the way Chavo described it, Benoit was a guy that had no emotion. He never really cried, shed a tear, blah, blah, blah. He lets out this big wail. Not even really a cry, but a wail. Like, who in your life do you just let out a wail for? And I can imagine who, but this was Benoit's best friend. Not just his best friend, but his brother. I mean, they weren't just close in the ring. Outside of the ring, they were close. Their families were close. We can just talk about Vicky and Nancy's relationship. Again, there's a lot of new stuff I learned, and I'm glad I learned it. Vicky had talked about dealing with Eddie passing away, and she said, that Nancy and Chris actually moved in with them for a month, and for a long time, Vicky didn't want to do anything. She didn't want to get out of bed. She didn't want to eat. She didn't want to take a shower. While this is happening, Nancy's taking care of the girls. She's feeding. She's making them food. Blah blah blah. And Nancy literally just walks into a room one day and says, "Hey, oh man, I'm getting choked up. Hey, you got to get up. You got to keep living. You got 2 girls that need you. Get your ass out of bed now." I mean, how many of us had to be that friend? I've had to be that friend. I've been the other friend. And it's a lot of people, everyone in this documentary, minus Benoit, they come off as being very likable. They come off looking good. Your hat's off to them. And so Nancy literally has to take Vicky out of bed and get her into the shower. While this is happening, Benoit is just he's still sulking over it. There's again, everything in this documentary is heartbreaking. There's a heartbreaking story. While they're living there, Vicky's daughters go up to Vicky and say, "Hey, Mom, Chris is crying," and Chris is in Eddie's workout room, and Vicky has to go in there and console him, and he's crying into Vicky's arms. He's crying on Eddie's side of the bed in their bedroom. Jericho talks about seeing at the funeral. Chris literally cried into his arms to where there was a patch of wetness in Jericho's suit that seeped all the way down onto the side of the arm. And literally right after that funeral, they all have to go on a European tour. At this time, Jericho wasn't with the company. I remember he actually left in August to, do his band and to, do other shit. And he was saying, like, if there's a good time to, take some time off, you might want to do it right now. And Benoit he became different to be around because, at the time Vicky was working in the company, and, Nancy would call Vicky and say, "How's Chris doing?" And she's like, "I don't know. I haven't seen him." What are they yelling about? And then they get to the murders. They get to Chavo, talking about how they had, they did Texas Loop. I remember, Vengeance that was in Houston in 2007. It was supposed to be Chris Benoit versus, CM Punk, the ECW title. And I remember that being a big deal. I remember watching that as a kid and going, "Oh shit, Benoit and CM Punk, 2 of my favorite wrestlers. This is gonna be a big match." And Chavo tells a story about on Friday he got a call from Benoit, saying, "Hey, Nancy and Daniel have food poisoning. I can't show up. I got to take them to the hospital." He's like, "All right," and Benoit just begrudgingly tells him, "I love you." And, Chavo noticed something was off about that because it sounded very forced. It didn't sound like, "Hey man, I love you. Take care, bro." It was like, "Hey, I love you." So he thought that was weird, but at the same time, he wasn't really thinking too much of it. He just assumed that Benoit was going to be back, for the pay per view, because he was in a big match. And then at 5, I'm just going to go through the whole episode, each episode. So I'll try not to make this just an entire review. It kind of is. It is and it isn't. But so Chavo gets those text messages, from Benoit's phone saying, "Hey, the dogs are in the enclosed pool area, yada yada yada." And then he gets a message from Nancy's phone saying the same thing. Again, he thought it was weird, but this was at 5:30 in the morning. So I'm assuming he chalked it up to like, is this a dream? This can't be real. So the very next night, which was Vengeance, it was 2 p.m. and Benoit still wasn't there. So Chavo goes to Brad Armstrong, who they were supposed to be traveling with, and he's like, "Did you get some weird text messages from Chris Benoit?" He's like, "Yeah, I did actually." And he's like, "Well, what do you say?" And he told him word for word what he just said. They showed John Laurinaitis. John Laurinaitis was like, "Chavo, why don't you tell us any sooner?" He's like, "We were just trying to cover for him. We had no idea what was going on." So, Vince McMahon, sends out a wellness check to Benoit's house. And here's where it gets even more eerie. You have the actual police, like the police officer that was on the case, who talked about, it seemed like something that was out of a movie, where, where Benoit and Nancy lived. It was known as like a very quiet place, and, a nice place, to have a family. And, people have met Benoit over there, but they just noticed he was very quiet, and he just kept to himself when he finished his workout. So they go to his house, and they notice that there's a neighbor at the house who watches the dogs. And he watches the dogs when they're in town. They ask the neighbor, "Have you seen Benoit?" She's like, "Benoit or anyone there?" He's like, "Honestly, I haven't seen him in 3 or 4 days." And they ask her, "Can you get the dogs out of the house so we can check the house?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the dogs know me, they like me." So she goes in there, and she's in there a lot longer than she would need to be. All of a sudden, she comes running out and says, "Daniel's dead, Daniel's dead." So they go in there and check the house, and it's daylight. And, they're describing every detail, which makes it even more creepy. They're describing there's a lot of windows in the house, so, there's a lot of light in the house. And, the cop, he's saying that he smells something. And then you just realize something is dead. Something is dead in this house. And he goes into Daniel's room, and, lo and behold, he finds Daniel face down in the bed. And then he goes to, I think it was the office. The office, and he finds Nancy. How she was presented. It was a phone cord, I believe. She was wrapped around with a phone cord and a towel around her. And there was blood on her, but it wasn't hers. It was Benoit's. So she was fighting back. All of a sudden, they go down to the basement, which is, I guess, where, not I guess, but, where he has his workout room. And when they're walking in, anyone who's ever been to a gym knows there's mirrors everywhere. So in his workout room, I guess right when you walk in, there's a big-ass mirror. And the other cop that was with the cop that was talking has said that she saw, somebody standing there. And she, says, "Show me your hands." The cop is like, "He's dead. He hung himself." Benoit had hung himself, with the cord in his, on one of his machines. He had put enough weight down, and he also put a weight on the weight. So that way it would get the job done a lot quicker. So there was a Bible next to each body. There were, empty bottles of wine. Matthew Randazzo, who wrote the Book of Hell, had been a lot more descriptive about it. Nancy, how Benoit killed Nancy, he wrapped her neck around with a telephone cord. And he literally put his knee into her fucking back and broke her fucking back. and that's how she died. Which, like, how fucking angry do you have to be to snap someone's back in half with your knee? Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, ugh. And, Dean Malenko's wife, she said, I had to imagine how scared she was for her life. Like, Jesus Christ. And, again, we don't know what they were arguing about. Randazzo, said to his knowledge, they were having a cookout on Friday, and they got into an argument, and, that's... It's so sick to think about. He kills Nancy. And the way it seems was that he killed Nancy, and he realized, because they were already talking about how, with Chris, that he was getting paranoid, that he was writing in his diary that he had a dream that Daniel was going to get kidnapped. He would tell his driver, to change routes to the house because he thought people were following him because they were going to kidnap Daniel. So that had to have been his mindset. That, I can't let Daniel be alone. Daniel needs me. So if anyone's going to kill him, it's going to be me. So he kills Daniel, which, Benoit has parents. He has parents. Nancy had parents. Nancy had a sister. Benoit had an ex-wife. Why not leave Daniel with one of them? Like, at the end of the day, you kill a kid, you lose any and all credibility. Because, I was talking to Andrew Carlick about this. Andrew Carlick, he tried to make a case that, he put on his Twitter, I can make a case that Jimmy Snuka is worse than Chris Benoit. I could see where he was coming from. And that's actually going to be an episode on Dark Side of the Ring, when he killed, I believe, his fiance or his girlfriend, and knew about it for 30 years and, didn't do shit about it. And I just made the case of, like, they're both shitty people, but you killed your son. You killed your own son, a 7-year-old boy who didn't die. He was innocent in all this. And that's what Vicky said, Nancy and Daniel were innocent, especially Daniel. I mean, if you want to kill yourself, you could have just gotten over with, but it's tough. It's tough even talking about it now. It didn't even happen to me. I'm talking about it. I'm getting goosebumps. So, and then Chavo and Vicky, they talk about when they got the news that, Vince had to break the news to everybody. Vince, Vicky let out a big wail. Chavo was still confused about it. And then, that night they had the tribute, which, if anyone remembers, that night was actually supposed to be, a funeral for Vince McMahon, because, the week of, the Benoit murders is when, that was actually the week before, actually. The week before, Vince McMahon died with his, his limo being blown up. And then that week they announced, next week we're going to have a eulogy for Vince McMahon. They're going to have, different people fly in and talk about it and just, shit all over Vince. That night, they just didn't have a crowd. They didn't let anyone in. Vince talked about tonight's just going to be about, Benoit, which you can't blame the WWE for doing that because they didn't know the details. They just knew that one of their own had passed away. So they did what they thought was the right thing, which, I don't blame them. If the facts had came out that day before the show started, then I would say, okay, maybe you shouldn't do a tribute. Like, still continue the show. But the only details that they got were, Benoit and Nancy and Daniel had died. Which gets into eulogies, which is, again, I had talked about this with John Draper on the show. That tribute show, there was an interesting part, which, hand to God, hand to fictional God, I remember this. And I think YouTube took it off. There's a part in it where Michael Cole and JBL are, introducing more people to give eulogies. They're about to introduce William Regal, which William Regal's is interesting. And I don't even remember that. Jericho had to bring that up. But they're about to introduce William Regal. JBL literally turns over to Cole before they go to Regal and say, do you think he had something to do with this? Not talking about Regal, but talking about Chris. Which, ugh. So they get to William Regal, which I'll play in a bit. Yeah, it's very eerie. Hold on, let me just pull this up real quick. Hopefully, you guys can hear it. You gotta be kidding me! Come on. All right, hold on. All right, let me just fix this shit.
Graphic designer, right here.
Okay, we don't need to hear this shit. I probably should have just kept it up before we did. Are you fucking kidding me? I don't give a fuck about your trial. YouTube. Would you like to do a trial for YouTube Premium? I don't give a damn. Okay, let me turn this down a little bit. Right. Hopefully you guys can hear this. Which I fixed the settings, so you guys should be able to hear this. So this is my first time watching it. I heard it, but I didn't get to watch the whole thing.
At a later date, I'll be quite happy to sit here and tell you all the things about Chris Benoit that I'd like to tell you. Now all I'm willing to say is that Chris Benoit was undoubtedly the hardest working man in professional wrestling, the most dedicated and totally absorbed in the business of professional wrestling about anybody I've ever met. And that's all I've really got to say at the moment. He was the absolute best. Thanks.
So, what made that interesting was Jericho had talked about all the eulogies on the show. He had talked about, Austin going out there and saying, I miss you, Chris. I love you, Chris. Triple H saying the same thing. Chavo saying the same thing. You get some William Regals. William Regals, and as you heard, was a lot more revealing. And then come to find out, William actually lived in the same area as Chris. He, didn't live that far from his house. And I imagine he hung out there a lot, and he knew Nancy pretty well. He knew Chris very well. And as you watch it, look up the video. Just look up, William Regal remembers Benoit, or just William Regal Benoit. And it's literally like the first video you see. As William Regal is giving, his eulogy, he there are points in it where he pauses and looks away, and then pauses and looks away, like multiple times. And as you heard it, he said, the only thing I'm willing to say is that, he was a great wrestler. And, to paraphrase, he's saying, I could talk about Benoit, but, then I'm going to, willing to say that he was a great wrestler. So, he fucking knew something. William Regal knew something. He knew something was going on. I'm not saying he knew exactly how they died, or why they were arguing, or blah, 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 but he knew something. And that's got to be eating away at him. So, again, it's chilling to watch these. Because I just remember watching that show once. And to watch that eulogy, it's chilling, because I think William Regal knew something. And it probably eats away at him that he thinks he could have saved Nancy and Daniel. He thinks he could have got him out of the house. And, flash forward, the aftermath, Sandra, Nancy's sister, tells a story about how Chris and Nancy got into an altercation. They had a fight, and, Chris ended up hurting her. She didn't really go into specifics out of respect to the kids, because, the kids are watching this. And so she's not going to go into specifics. So, there was a wrestler, I'm forgetting who. He was in a tag team, and he lived close to Chris, and he, know him. he was, trying to calm down Chris, and Nancy was staying. I think she was staying with Sandra. Chris calls Sandra, and somehow convinces her, talk to Nancy for me. And that's another thing that Sandra, feels guilt on, which is, if I had not talked to her, maybe Nancy would still be alive. Maybe Nancy and Daniel wouldn't have been with Chris. And it hurts for a lot of people to talk. Everybody in this, it seemed like it was a good thing for them, but there was so much pain, especially with Sandra, especially with David. Jericho I'll talk about in a bit. But then you get some more aftermath. Jim Ross shows up at the wake for Nancy and Danny, and Sandra goes up to him and cusses him out, saying, "You don't belong here." In her mind, she thought that was a work. That he was a WWE guy there, and she told him, "You don't belong here. You're not welcome here." So Jim Ross even got that feeling, and before it happened, that he was the most unwelcome person in the building, because he was the only WWE person that was willing to go over there and pay his respects. And that's another thing, is WWE did not reach out to the families of Nancy and Chris. They didn't reach out to Daniel. I mean, not Daniel, David. David said the only two people that helped him were Jericho and Chavo. Other than that, no. And that just made my skin crawl when I saw it. That he said nobody from the WWE reached out to me. They tried to act like I didn't exist. Screw them. Sandra said, nobody in wrestling reached out to her except Jericho years later, who she described as a wrestling angel come to life, which I thought was kind of cute. Vicky and Dean Malenko, talked about how WWE told him, don't talk about Benoit. Don't talk about Benoit in interviews. Pretty much, if you talk about Benoit, you're going to get in trouble. They said, hey, we want to keep her job, so. Which, again, that's another thing I can understand. You don't want to acknowledge Benoit. Why not help out the fucking family? Why not reach out to, David, that's still here? Why not reach out to Sandra? Why not reach out to the families and help them? Oh my god, these fucking notifications. But if you're hearing a noise, I have my Discord closed, but for some reason I'm still getting fucking notifications. I don't know why. And it's from other people's channels. Oh my god. This is really throwing me off. Give me 1 second. Okay. So how do I turn off the notifications for her? Okay, here we go. Let's take care of that. Again, I get you had to not mention Benoit, and they're a publicly traded company, and wrestling already had a sour taste in people's mouths. Now you have parents thinking, well, I don't want my kid watching this because, one of your wrestlers became a serial killer. So I don't want to be around that. So I get why they don't have to mention Benoit. Which, lately they've been showing him a lot. So I don't know if that means anything. But, why not help out the families? Why pretend that they don't matter, like they weren't affected by it? I mean, that's just a dick move. That's a dick move. That's a piece of shit move, honestly. And then, later in the documentary, there's a pretty touching moment, with David just remembering Chris. He tells the last memory he had with, Chris and Nancy and David. I mean, not David, Daniel. And, mid-sentence he just breaks down. All of a sudden you see Chavo, come off screen and just, nurture him, say, hey, everything's going to be okay. Before that, they had asked Sandra about had she had any contact with, the Benoit family, the kids. And she said, I tried, but it wasn't successful because somebody had told me that they didn't want anything to do with us. And in return, they told them that they didn't want anything to do with them, which, she said wasn't true at all. And, when that segment happened after Chavo was consoling David, you see Sandra come off screen and, oh man, I'm getting choked up. Hug David. It's, if you don't walk away from this documentary not feeling anything, you have a heart of stone. Like, you feel nothing. You need to get your emotions in order. So, Sandra tells a story of, Chris Jericho, got them, reunited. He gave David her number, and he gave David, he gave Sandra his number, and he gave David her number. And, now they're reunited. That's now the only thing that matters in her life. I don't know if she's married or has kids, which she didn't really say she did. But the only thing that matters in her life is that she has her nephew back. Her niece back, I don't know. That's a different story. I don't think we're ever going to find out about that. But, they go to an AEW show. It shows them talking in the back. It shows Dean Malenko reuniting with, Sandra, talking to her. It shows them talking to Jericho. David says, it feels like I got 13 years of pain off my back. Which is good. I said it. I don't think this is something you don't ever get over. I mean, you can get over a breakup. You can get over losing your job. You don't get over losing your father or your mother or your sister or your brother or a loved one. And especially if, before they died, they committed a really heinous act. This is just, Mish had an interesting way of describing this, and I'm forgetting how he said it. It's, it's not just a wound, it's a scab. And you just, I think, was it you scab over the wound? He said he had an interesting way of describing it is, you just have to move on. You can't just get over it. You have to make peace with it and move on with your life. You need to keep living. Which, this goes back to Jericho. Jericho seems like kind of like the stern, tough love, friend in this, where you'll get Chavo. Chavo looks like he's the nurturing one. Chavo looks like he's the one saying, hey man, just let it all out. It's okay to be sad. I hurt too. Jericho's the one that, I bet Dollars to Donuts called, David and said, hey, you gotta keep moving. You gotta keep living. Live your life. Don't feel sorry for yourself. This isn't your fault. You didn't do anything. You're innocent in this. Now here's where I go to Jericho. You look at everybody in the documentary. They all have the same, I guess, emotion to it, and as they should. Jericho looks like he's angry. You can tell the way he's describing things. He didn't shed a tear in this once, which he said he did. He tells a story about when he got the news that Benoit died, that he just cried. He let out this giant wail, and he had a son with him, and his son, said, Dad, you cry funny. The same thing with Eddie. He looks like he doesn't want to spend too much time crying about it and, talking about it. I mean, talk about it, but also just, he already made his peace. He already cried about it before. He doesn't want to cry about it again. He just wants to be able to talk about it. Jericho looks like he's angry. He looks like he has unresolved issues as far as, Benoit goes, because, Vicky had said she didn't go to Chris's funeral. I doubt any of them have even been to Chris's grave. I think that's something they need to do eventually, which he wasn't buried, he was cremated, but he still has a grave. I think that's something eventually they need to do. Because my whole thing is, you can't just forgive somebody. I mean, that's just my opinion. My whole thing is, I don't forgive people, but I'm not going to stay mad my whole life. I'm just going to move on with my life. And maybe that's something they need to do. They can either forgive them, or they can just make their peace. And finally, say, hey, I'm here, we haven't talked in a while. But Jericho did a great job. Everybody did a great job. Everybody walks away from this looking likable, except obviously Benoit, but Chavo comes off as being very likable. And this, my respect for him goes up. Vicky. I already liked Vicky before. I always hear she's a super nice, sweet lady. She comes off looking nice. Nancy again got the spotlight. She looked like a sweetheart. She comes off as a sweetheart. She comes off as somebody that you ask anyone in the wrestling business, except maybe Kevin Sullivan, they all say they love Nancy. Even New Jack. New Jack hates everybody and he loves Nancy. Which, that's actually going to be next week's episode about New Jack, so that'll be interesting. But overall, this documentary, if you're a wrestling fan, even if you're not if you're a wrestling fan, you need to watch this. This is something you must watch. It's already on YouTube. Both episodes are on YouTube on Vice. You need to watch it. I mean, it's that simple. If you're a wrestling fan, you need to watch this. If you're a wrestling fan, maybe you won't enjoy it. If you're maybe a fan of crime, I don't know. But, you'll definitely enjoy this. We're already at an hour and 25. Spent a big portion talking about, the Benoit tragedies. I pretty much hit up everything I wanted to talk about tonight. So, again, I pre-recorded this. We're not live. I didn't really feel like going live, honestly. But hopefully I'll be back live next week. But shout out to Wrestling Soup. Go to their Patreon. Shout out to John Draper, Mish and Joey, Don Tony, Kevin Castle. Shout out to them. Go to their Patreon. Shout out to Trez, who's on KNT Chronicle, or was it KNT Chronicles with Kev, which is one of their Patreon shows. Shout out to Wrestling Court. I was on there last night, so look for that to drop. Julian and Rob. Also, Chris Pettis. Follow him. He's a good dude. Let's see. Shout out to Architect Podcast. I don't even know if they're doing shows anymore, honestly, but, listen to them. During this pandemic, show some love to our podcasters. Listen to them. We're out here to entertain. So shout out to Texas Podcast Massacre. If you're a fan of horror movies, listen to them. They just had Kevin Castle on, where they talk about Friday the 13th, the remake with Jared Padalecki from Supernatural. Let's see, am I missing somebody else? Shout out to my friend Peter. He has two podcasts, which is Bops and Bangers, which is mainly a music podcast, and he has Peter Position, which is, I guess, more politically driven. Listen to his podcast. Shout out to the Rupin Prime TV podcast. He's a good friend of me. Good friend of the show, good friend of mine. Shout out to the Trademark Show with Tyler. If I'm missing anyone, I'm sorry. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, The Drew Yari Show, Instagram, Drew Yari Show, Facebook, Drew Yari Show. Subscribe on my Spreaker. Hit like, subscribe. Tell your friends about it. It's pretty much anywhere else that podcasts are put out. Go to my YouTube if you want to listen to the show. Also, if you want to watch me stream, I'm streaming video games on there now. I'm playing Uncharted 2. I'm trying to finish the series before I start Last of Us 2, which comes out in May. Which, I mean, again, hopefully everything is open up by that time. I mean, I'm probably just going to buy the game digitally. So you'll be seeing me with that. What the hell is that noise? Anyways, I'm going to check on that in a bit because that's kind of frightening me. Anyways, show some love to everybody. Show some love to me. I'll be back next week. And laters, guys.